Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or simply BJJ, is one of the most influential martial arts of the modern day. It has touched the lives of thousands throughout the whole world. But where and how has it all started? Hi, my name is Rogers Leo, and today we are going to look at the brief history of BJJ. Although the name of BJJ strongly emphasizes Jiu-Jitsu, not everyone knows that its roots are actually that much closer to Judo than one could think. It all started in Japan in the late 1800s, when Professor Jigoro Kano started reinventing the traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, which was then losing its popularity because of the changing times of the Meiji Restoration and the end of the samurai class. Sensei Kano was strongly influenced by Jiu-Jitsu himself, which helped him not only become stronger, but also a better person, what led him to the passion of sharing his experience. And the more he taught traditional Jiu-Jitsu, the more he realized that he wanted to change the emphasis of his style so that it would be not only more efficient, but also more accessible and profound. As his art grew and became widely known, he slowly started introducing the name of Judo, the gentle way, yet to the most it was still known as simply Kano's Jiu-Jitsu. In 1904, one of the senior students of Sensei Kano, Mitsuya Maeda, together with a couple of other Kano students, were offered a chance to move to the States, which they saw as a great chance to further promote the already increasingly popular Kano's Jiu-Jitsu. Their demonstrations were very well received across the whole nation, and in further years, Maeda even traveled around Europe to give demonstrations there as well. In 1914, Maeda ended up in Brazil, where he continued to give demonstrations. A series of his demonstrations were presented in a circus in Belém, where he met Gustavo Gracie, a business partner of the circus, and became good friends. In 1917, Gustavo's son Carlos Gracie, at the time only 15 years old, was so impressed by Maeda's demonstration that he decided to start learning from him. Maeda took on Carlos and a few other Brazilians as his students, teaching them his way of Jiu-Jitsu. Although technically it was already Judo, one of the brothers of Carlos in a much later interview said that he learned of the name Judo only in 1950s when Judo was introduced as a sport in Brazil, and that Maeda himself referred to his style simply as Jiu-Jitsu. Carlos Gracie dedicated himself to the study of this Jiu-Jitsu and later on shared his knowledge with his siblings, from which most notably was Helio Gracie. Carlos and his brothers were often training, what sometimes involved even actual fighting, yet Helio was not able to join their brothers since he was too frail and sickly. Nevertheless, he continued to watch his brothers train and slowly started developing his own training methods and techniques, which relied less on physical strength and more on skills. As the Gracies, alongside Helio, continued to develop their jiu-jitsu to be as effective as possible, Judo was slowly emphasized more as a sport, focusing less on ground techniques. With time, these differences between the two styles became increasingly evident, what today makes them hardly recognizable as once being so close to each other. In 1925, Carlos opened the Gracie family's first BJJ academy. The academy was managed by his family members, of which most also practiced jiu-jitsu. During this period, the Gracies not only taught their martial art, but also participated and even organized their own rule-less fights, which were back then known as Vale Tudo. The Gracies were able to win most of their fights and thus became famous. Their students started including famous artists, architects, politicians, and various doctors. Later on, members of the Gracie family moved on to the States to further promote their art. Here they started organizing the Gracie Challenges, open events which invited masters of different martial arts to challenge members of the Gracie family and their style of jiu-jitsu. Horion Gracie, son of Helio, even offered $100,000 to anyone who could defeat him or his brothers in these matches. Following the success of these events, the Gracies became notorious in the martial arts world. To differentiate between the other jiu-jitsu styles that were present in the day, they started referring to their style as the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, or was sometimes referred to simply as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The fame of the Gracies was already high, yet Horion wanted to make it even more popular to the main public. In 1993, this desire eventually led to the creation of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, or UFC, which was co-hosted by Horion. It was a no-holds-barred event similar to that of Vale Tudo and the Gracie Challenges. It was promoted to find out who would be the strongest fighter, bringing 8 different practitioners of various martial arts to fight each other. Horion handpicked Royce Gracie, his younger brother, to represent the Gracie family. Royce was able to win the tournament mostly by using his jiu-jitsu skills. The UFC proved to be very successful, thus bringing a huge amount of attention, especially to the winning style of the event. Although already relatively successful, after the event, the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu popularity skyrocketed. Many people of the time started seeing it as the most effective martial art, with other fighters even implementing its skills to their regime too. These events led to hundreds of thousands of people training BJJ throughout the whole world, not only in MMA, but also in its own popular sport form as BJJ tournaments. The Jiu-Jitsu, which touched the Gracie family and was developed by them, continues to be highly respected and further evolved not only by its family members, but also by dedicated people throughout the whole world. These days, Muay Thai is widely known as one of the most efficient striking martial arts because of its use and popularity in MMA. Yet sometimes we forget the deep heritage and traditions that it comes from and some of the reasons it exists. Here are 8 essential facts about Muay Thai that makes it such an amazing and unique martial art. Fact 1. Although Muay Thai literally means Thai boxing, it is also referred to as the art of 8 limbs or the science of 8 limbs because it makes use of punches, kicks, elbows, and knee strikes, thus using 8 points of contact as opposed to 2 points, fists in boxing, and 4 points, hands and feet, used in other more regular combat sports such as kickboxing and savate. Fact 2. The Thai were on constant guard against attack from neighboring countries including Burma and Cambodia. Needing an efficient way to protect themselves, Muay Thai became a primary part not only of the Thai culture, but also a mandatory training part of the Thai military. Thus, Muay Thai evolved in the midst of war as the military continued to train soldiers for centuries in the art of Muay Thai, refining the skills, tactics, and techniques with the wars against the invaders. Fact 3. Being partially a product of constant battles, Muay Thai uses the body to mimic the weapons of war. The hands become the sword and dagger, the shins and forearms were hardened in training to act as armor against blows, the legs and knees became the axe and staff, and the elbows to bring down opponents as with a heavy mace or hammer. The desired end result was having the body operating as one unit. Fact 4. Muay Thai, with its rich history and culture, is full of honor, respect, and dignity. Sometimes it is called the sport of kings, as the Thai monarchy has always played a prominent role in the development of the art and sport. Here, the same values applied. One of the kings winning a fair fight was known as the Tiger King, who was infamous for disguising himself in a tiger mask while competing in tournaments to hide his royal heritage, since if the other Thai fighters would have known it was their king, they would have bowed before him and pleaded not to fight out of deep love and respect. But the king hid his identity to have a fair and hard-fought match with each of his opponents, as a result being a great example of the values of this martial art. Fact 5. While in many dojos and martial arts these days, a new practitioner can feel that he deserves respect and full attention just because they paid the monthly fee. Yet when young men want to enter into a traditional Muay Thai gym in Thailand to become a fighter, they must first pay respect to their teacher and give respect and honor to the gym where they will train. There may also be a significant initiation where the prospective student must spend time in meditation at a temple or perform some ritualistic tasks. Students are also usually expected to give some form of gift or offering, such as a white linen cloth, flowers, or incense alongside a small monetary offering. Fact 6. One of the oldest traditions of Muay Thai is a dance called Ramway, which every fighter performed before a fight. Before every fight, the boxer seals the ring by circling it 3 times, after which they perform the ritualistic dance, showing respect to their opponents and opposing camps, as well as parents, teachers, and whatever religion they may believe in. Many boxers will also display their techniques in this warm-up, giving the perfect opportunity for their opponents to study them. For some boxers, the Ramway represents deep spiritual beliefs, while for others, it's the perfect warm-up before a fight to get the mind and body ready for competition. Fact 7. The Thai people are known for being superstitious in their belief of evil spirits and ghosts. Muay Thai is also influenced by this culture. Fighters have for centuries used special tattoos, wards, amulets, and ceremonies to increase their good fortune and ward off bad luck and evil spirits that might follow them into the ring. Some fighters will often go to the temple, a witch doctor, or a high-ranking priest to have tattoo inscriptions etched into their skin. The powerful inscriptions are supposed to provide special protection, grant strength, courage, long life, or even sexual prowess. Fact 8. Muay Thai fighters often begin training when they are 6 to 8 years old. They will begin fighting between 8 to 10 years of age and may have as many as 120 to 150 fights, which is 3 times as many as a very active boxer, before they are 24 years old. The typical Muay Thai fighter in Thailand trains many hours every day, yet most of them do it not because of a good life. Many fighters will fight every 3 to 4 weeks just to be able to support their family. Unlike boxing in the West, regular Muay Thai fighters in Thailand make very little money from each fight, bringing home about $100 to $150 every month, which is barely enough to support one person, much less a family. Martial arts these days are influenced by our fast pace and desire to receive more in less time and effort. But remembering the traditions and cultures that these practices came from, we can also remember that it's meant to not only create an efficient fighter, but also to improve our lives and our character as a whole. Muay Thai is one great example of this. We all enjoy a rush of adrenaline. We all love to see great strength and competition being presented to us. A sight of an MMA fight can be an amazing and inspiring event. After watching it, we can feel on a high in our own lives, wanting to achieve more and become more. And that is a great thing. Yet everything has a cost. Everything has two sides to it. And so definitely does MMA. Hi, my name is Rogas Leo, and today we're going to look at the brief history of MMA and one of its dark sides. Mixed martial arts is not a new thing. It actually dates back all the way to 648 BC when Greek pankratio, a martial art combining boxing and wrestling techniques, was introduced to Olympic Games. Yet the MMA we know today in its history is more rooted in Brazil, early 1900s, where Vale Tudo, or no holds barred, matches were born. Mitsuya Maeda, a Japanese judo champion who migrated to Brazil in 1917, met Carlos Gracie, a Brazilian man who started training with him and learning what was then still widely known as Kano Jiu-Jitsu, named after its founder. Carlos later shared the obtained knowledge with his brothers, thus starting what we now know as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or simply BJJ. The Gracie family, wanting to promote their martial art, started organizing their own Vale Tudo events where they challenged different combat arts to prove their effectiveness, and most of the times were actually successful. In early 1980s, Rorion Gracie, the son of Helio Gracie, one of the founders of BJJ, moved to the States where he continued the tradition together with his brothers and held up the Gracie Challenge, where they took on all comers. Rorion even offered $100,000 to anyone who could defeat him or his brothers in a Vale Tudo style match. In this way, the Gracies were becoming notorious in the American martial arts community, yet Rorion still had a desire to bring the Vale Tudo matches to the main public to further promote the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This eventually led to the creation of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, or UFC, a no-holds-barred event which was streamed in pay-per-view television. The event was won by Horace Gracie, a member of the Gracie family, who mainly used his family's jiu-jitsu. This led various fighters to include BJJ and also other styles of martial arts into their own training regime to get a better edge against others, and in this way creating a modern take on mixed martial arts or MMA. Although the event was planned to be a one-off, it received such huge success that a chain of further UFC events followed, creating a strong tradition of MMA fights in the whole world. Yet as every event, it had its dark sides too. UFC in its early days had a reputation of being extremely violent to such an extent that it even drew the attention of the US authorities, leading to 36 states enacting laws that banned no-holds-barred fighting. Following the criticism, UFC increased cooperation with the state athletic commissions and redesigned its rules to remove the less palatable elements of fights while retaining the core elements of striking and grappling. Following some other changes, in 2001, UFC gained its way back to the pay-per-view television and became the fastest-growing sport in America. Yet despite the changing of its rules, it still had a hidden shadow that is actually a huge danger to every MMA fighter up to this day. In the beginning of UFC's history, fights didn't involve as many punches. This actually wasn't so much a result of strategy as it was a result of lack of gloves. Although many could think that a punch to the head without gloves lead to more impact, in reality bare knuckles of the hand are quite fragile, and early MMA fighters often even broke their hands punching their opponents in the tough bones of the head. Back in the beginning of UFC, most winning strategies almost always involved grappling. Because of the lack of gloves, going for knockout punches was a dangerous strategy, making grappling the safer, more effective choice. Yet that was not as enjoyable for the crowd to watch, of which most part wasn't aware of the grappling subtleties happening on the ground. In wanting to increase the mass appeal of the sport, UFC added gloves, which led to heavy punches to the head becoming a more common strategy to win a fight with the knockout. Many other rules and scoring changes to favor strikers were added too, to make the sport more thrilling to watch. While surely this strategy was very successful in a commerce sense, it also added a huge hidden cost to the fighters themselves. With receiving constant punches in the head, increasingly more studies started showing a huge and common danger of brain injury in MMA. The American Journal of Sports Medicine in 2014 found that a regular MMA fighter suffered a traumatic brain injury in almost a third of professional bouts, later stating that rates of KOs and TKOs in MMA are higher than previously reported rates in other combative and contact sports. While there are many dangers to brain damage itself, not everyone knows that it can be not only serious, but also permanent and largely irreversible. Various symptoms of brain damage include mood swings, loss of consciousness, amnesia, irritability, slowed reaction times, and sleep disturbances, leading to significant changes to a fighter's life. A famous MMA fighter, Gary Big Daddy Goodridge, who is only in his 40s, has to take multiple medications suited for Alzheimer's patients and suffers constant memory loss, which is often noticed by his close friends. It is also believed that brain damage can lead to depression, which more and more fighters are being diagnosed with. This does not only lead to a great decrease in the quality of fighters' personal life, but also leads to a growing danger of possible suicide. While the fatal effects of depression are still a theoretical danger, the brain injury itself can sometimes even lead to direct deadly results. Just recently, in April 9, 2016, Joel Carvalho suffered so many punches to the head during a single fight that 20 minutes after the technical knockout, he fell ill and 48 hours later died in a hospital of brain injury. The sustained damage was based strongly on the open rules of the fight, which allow a sequence known as ground and pound, where an opponent takes the other to the ground, obtaining a dominant grappling position, and then striking the opponent in a long sequence of punches only until the referee interferes. This fatal event opened up intense discussion about the danger of MMA, especially in relationships to brain damage, with some people even suggesting to bring back bare-knuckle fights to decrease the sustained damage. Yet so far, the future direction of the sport is still unclear. Everyone who enjoys watching MMA fights has their one or two favorite fighters. Yet besides enjoying their charisma and amazing skills on the screen, do we spend enough time thinking about what cost they have to pay to offer that side to us? Are we really ready to sacrifice the quality of life and even the lives themselves of these great fighters for our own entertainment? Or should we talk and enroll ourselves more into seeking change that would be for the benefit of these respected people? Anyone could name a whole set of different martial arts. Most have tried at least one of them at some point of their lives or actively are practicing it. Yet when we look at the history of martial arts, at best we know a few stories about our own practice, yet what to speak about the whole history of martial arts in the entire world? Hi, my name is Rokas Leo, and today we will fill this gap with a brief history of the roots and evolution of all martial arts in the entire world. Definition. Before we begin, let us define what a martial art is. The word martial derives from the name of Mars, the Roman god of war, making the term martial arts literally mean the art of Mars, or to put more simply, the art of war. This term comes from 15th century Europeans who were referring to this way to their own fighting arts that are today known as historical European martial arts. Yet in its entirety, martial arts throughout history can be defined as systems of codified practices and traditions of training for combat. While each style has unique facets that make it different from other martial arts, with some of them being more linked to spiritual, religious beliefs, or philosophies, a common characteristic is that they are all systemizations of fighting techniques. And these systemizations started very early on throughout the entire world. Antiquity. The earliest evidence of martial arts comes from depictions of fights both in figurative art and in early literature. Although martial arts are commonly associated with East Asian cultures, the oldest work of art depicting scenes of battle dates back to 3400 BCE Egypt in paintings. A section found in the Indian Vedas from 1700 to 1100 BCE already contained references to martial arts with both armed and barehanded combat. Looking even further to the west, boxing became a part of the Olympic Games in Greece as early as 688 BCE, with detailed depictions of wrestling techniques being preserved in vase paintings of the classical period, while the Romans produced gladiatorial combat as a public spectacle starting from 3rd century BC. Greek pankration, a martial art that included empty hand submission, with scarcely any rules, used techniques from boxing and wrestling, but also other types such as kicking and holds, locks and chokes on the ground, where the only thing not acceptable were biting and gouging out the opponent's eyes. Pankration is actually even considered to be one of the very first mixed martial arts in history. Looking back at Asia, where most of our well-known martial arts originated, according to a legend, in China, during a semi-mythical dynasty more than 4,000 years ago, the so-called Yellow Emperor introduced the earliest fighting systems to his country. Yet the earliest historical references to Chinese martial arts are found in the 5th century BCE, where a hand-to-hand combat theory, one that integrates notions of hard and soft techniques, is mentioned in a book. Interestingly enough, the foundation of traditional Asian martial arts is actually most likely not only a blend of early Chinese, but also of Indian martial arts, since extensive trade occurred between these nations in 6th century BC, as they shared not only their merchandises, but also culture and knowledge. Only later in China, during the Warring States period in 480-221 BC, extensive development in martial art philosophy and strategy of its own emerged, as described by Sun Tzu in The Art of War. All this could be considered the dawn of martial arts, as these early forms continue to be further developed and evolved in the Middle Ages. Middle Ages. Most Japanese martial arts origins can be found in the Middle Ages, during the development of the warrior traditions of the samurai and the caste system that restricted the use of weapons by other members of society. Originally, samurai were expected to be proficient in many weapons, as well as unarmed combat, reaching for the highest possible mastery of combat skills, which brought a lot of attention to the development of martial arts. Although it is likely that the first iron swords were manufactured in Japan in the 4th century, based on technology imported from China, the oldest schools of Japanese swordsmanship in existence today arose in the 14th century, and such arts as Bato Jutsu, literally meaning the art of science of a drawing sword, developed in the mid-15th century. In order to know how to counter an opponent with a sword, the well-known Jiu-Jitsu began developing around the 15th century too, combining various Japanese martial arts which were used on the battlefield for close combat in situations where weapons were ineffective. In contrast to the neighboring nations of China and Okinawa, whose martial arts were centered around striking techniques, Japanese hand-to-hand combat forms focused heavily upon throwing, immobilizing, joint locks, and choking, as striking techniques were simply inefficient towards someone wearing armor on the battlefield. Exploring martial arts during medieval ages in China, we come across an early legend in martial arts that tells the tale of an Indian monk known as Bodhidharma, also called Daruma, believed to have lived around 550 AD, who is credited with influencing the unarmed combat arts of the Shaolin Temple in China, while also finding the meditative philosophy of Zen Buddhism. It is sometimes considered that actually here the martial virtues of discipline, humility, restraint, and respect were developed. With regards to the Shaolin fighting system itself, the oldest historical evidence of Shaolin participation in combat is from a recorded battle which happened in 728 CE and defending of the Shaolin monastery from bandits around 610 CE. In Korea, a martial art also developed in the Middle Ages known as Serum, where it gained widespread popularity starting from the 14th century. The West was well acquainted with its ways of war too, not standing down to its Asian contemporaries. Pictorial source of medieval combat was already present in 11th and 13th century, where also an earliest martial arts manual of the West was compiled in a monastery detailing sword and buckler combat and consisting a manuscript of 64 images, while manuals of wrestling techniques were compiled even earlier. Wrestling throughout the Middle Ages was actually very popular and was practiced by all social levels. Jousting and the tournament were also a popular martial art practiced by nobility throughout the High and Late Middle Ages. During the late Middle Ages, there was an appearance of elaborate fencing systems, such as the German or Italian schools, with its teaching still being preserved in a number of 15th century books. Unfortunately, with the changing of times, the martial arts of the West suffered a lot of loss. Modern Ages. With the rise of firearms, martial arts in Europe experienced a strong decline, and as a consequence, they do not exist with the historical roots in Europe today to the same extent as in Asia. Despite that, a number of historical fencing forms and manuals still have survived from 1400 to 1900 AD, and many groups today are actively working to reconstruct older European martial arts to become a part of our culture again. The process of reconstruction combines intensive study of detailed combat treatises produced, including such styles as sword and shield, two-handed sword fighting, halberd fighting, and other types of melee weapons combat. All this reconstruction effort and modern outgrowth of the historical methods is generally referred to as Western martial arts. Some well-known modern martial arts emerged in the West during the modern ages too. A well-known martial art called savate, also known as French boxing or French kickboxing, is a martial art that uses the hands and feet as weapons, combining elements of Western boxing with graceful kicking techniques. It was born at the beginning of the 19th century mainly from a mixture of French street fighting and fighting methods of French sailors. This style is still actively practiced today. Even further to the west, another Western martial art emerged known as capoeira, a Brazilian martial art that combines elements of dance, acrobatics, and music, which was mainly developed by West Africans in the beginning of the 16th century. In Asia, most fighting styles that are being practiced as traditional Chinese martial arts today reached their popularity in the modern ages too. The increase in popularity of these styles is a result of the dramatic changes that occurred within the Chinese society in the 20th century. The present view of Chinese martial arts are strongly influenced by the events of the Republican period in 1912 to 1949, when Chinese martial arts became more accessible to the general public as many martial artists were encouraged to openly teach their art. At that time, some considered martial arts even as a means to promote national pride and to build a strong nation. Thus, many training manuals were published, a training academy opened, as well as demonstration teams traveling overseas, and numerous martial arts associations formed not only throughout China, but in various overseas Chinese communities too. Some of the best known martial arts today developed in Japan during this period too. After the Meiji Restoration in the 19th to 20th century, which ended the ruling of the samurai class, martial arts such as judo, kendo, aikido, karate, and many others were formed mostly by people wanting to preserve traditional ways of combat while the samurai culture was fading away into history, and also with a desire to adapt the old ways to the new times. The 16th century also saw the emergence of Muay Thai, a traditional Thai martial art. It still took some time for the West to become interested in the martial ways of Asia. Although the Western interest in Asian martial arts increased in the late 19th century due to the increase in trade between America with China and Japan, relatively few Westerners actually practiced the arts back then, as they considered them to be a mere performance. That still didn't stop Edward William Barton Bright, a railway engineer who had studied jiu-jitsu while working in Japan between 1894 and 97, who was the first man known to have taught Asian martial arts in Europe, helping to spread them and to change people's beliefs and opinions. He also found an eclectic martial arts style named Bartitsu, which combines jiu-jitsu, judo, boxing, savate, and stick fighting. Yet Asian martial arts weren't still as influential until the later 1970s and 1980s, which witnessed an increased media interest in the martial arts, thanks in part to Asian and Hollywood martial arts movies, which helped bring huge attention to these practices, their popularity, and growth. With the help of such prominent movie figures as Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Jet Li, and others, Asian martial arts today became a huge interest of many people. As Eastern martial arts were introduced more and more to the West, other mixtures of martial arts started to emerge as well. One of the most notable ones being what we now call Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which was actually a more changed and evolved version of early judo than Jiu-Jitsu itself. Year after year, martial arts still kept evolving and being mixed together, the appearance of mixed martial arts known as MMA, Taekwondo, various military combat-based martial arts such as Israeli Krav Maga, and more. Epilogue. These days we tend to limit our definition of martial arts only to Asian combat practices. But in truth, the martial arts history in the world is far more wider and intriguing as most of us have thought. We tend to forget that there are so many martial arts that have a unique heritage and deserve their own right place and respect in the world. Whether it's the playful capoeira, medieval sword fencing, boxing, philosophical aikido, or combat efficient Krav Maga, they all have their place as they shaped, mixed, and changed with the changes of times and cultures. Although it's impossible to introduce all martial arts histories in less than 15 minutes, I hope you liked this video. If you did, press that like and subscribe button to support our channel and see us make even more videos about martial arts. Also, if you have some requests or ideas about the next video, let us know in the comments too. This was Rokos Leo, and see you on the virtual mat again soon. Although it's already decades since Bruce Lee passed away, even today thousands of people are inspired about his charisma and martial arts skills. He has given us amazing stories, sights, and insights that we still find amazing. Yet what made this martial arts superstar so great? Why can't we never get enough of Bruce Lee? Hi, my name is Rokos Leo, and this time we're going back to look at a brief history of the secret of Bruce Lee. Born in 1940s at the Chinese hospital in San Francisco's Chinatown, according to the Chinese zodiac, Lee was born in both the hour and the year of the dragon, which according to the tradition is a strong omen. Yet despite being born under a good sign, Bruce's life has its ups and downs right from the early age. After Lee's birth, his family moved back to Hong Kong, where he was constantly taunted by English schoolboys who appeared to feel superior to the Chinese. This led Bruce to constantly getting into fights and eventually to the desire to learn martial arts. In 1957, Lee began training in Wing Chun Kung Fu, where he already started showing signs of great persistence. After a year into his training, most of his fellow students refused to train with him when they learned of his mixed ancestry, as the Chinese were generally against teaching their martial arts techniques to non-Asians. Being as persistent as he was, Bruce didn't stop because of that and instead managed to convince his teacher, the great Yip Man, to teach him personally, which was a very rare success to any of his students. Bruce became deeply devoted to his training, and with that intense training he also showed great success. Yet his devotion to development didn't stop there. Besides his martial arts practice, not many know that he was also into dancing, acting, and even poetry. He even won the Hong Kong Cha-Cha Championship, and despite that the movie industry in China back then was not big at the time, following his passion for acting, he starred in more than 20 films before leaving the country. At the age of 18, in 1959, Lee returned to the United States with $100 in his pocket to continue his high school education. To earn money, he taught some dancing and later worked as a live-in waiter for a restaurant. Following his yearning for growth, in 1961, he joined the University of Washington. Again, he displayed his perseverance by completely devoting himself to studies here. In order to further deepen his knowledge of martial arts, he intensely studied philosophy and psychology alongside drama and various other subjects. In order to support himself financially, he started teaching Kung Fu, first to his close friends and later, encouraged by them, opened his first martial arts school and even taught in the university where he met his wife Linda during the training. Following the success of his teaching, Lee decided to become a professional instructor and soon after opened a second school. Yet his hunger still didn't stop there. In 1964, some Chinese Kung Fu practitioners from San Francisco objected Bruce's teaching Chinese martial arts to Westerners, challenged him to a duel with the terms that if Bruce would lose, he would have to stop teaching. Lee was able to win, yet despite that, he was unhappy of not being able to beat his opponents in less than 3 minutes, and thus decided to deepen his exploration and martial arts even more, what led him to the evolution of his own style, Jeet Kune Do. In August 1964, Bruce was invited to give a public demonstration of his martial arts skills, where he performed so well that he was later suggested to star in a new TV show called The Green Hornet as the main sidekick. Nevertheless, that didn't stop Bruce from further developing his understanding of martial arts. Where most practitioners stop at a certain skill level, Lee not only continued to hone his skills, but also read and wrote extensively his thoughts about physical combat, psychology of fighting, philosophical roots of martial arts, motivation, self-actualization, and even liberation of the individual. There was rarely a time when Bruce was doing nothing. He was often seen reading a book, doing forearm curls, and watching a boxing film at the same time. Despite becoming extremely proficient, his arduous training also led to some negative results. Because of his extreme exercises, he eventually ended up hurting his spine so badly that the doctors predicted he would never be able to do Kung Fu again. Yet even here, he was able to show his perseverance and stubbornness to not take life's detours as final. After spending 6 months in bed, Lee created his own recovery program, which followed carefully, eventually led him back to full martial arts practice. Even in his acting career, he had ups and downs, but never stopped seeking his goals. Having limited attention in Hollywood, Bruce visited Hong Kong, where he was offered to star in various movies which had great success. This led him to writing and even directing one of his today legendary movies, The Way of the Dragon, which also starred Chuck Norris. With Lee becoming famous in the East, more recognition in the West came too, and the first ever Hong Kong American co-production movie, now famously known as Enter the Dragon, has been filmed. Unfortunately, in 1973, when Bruce was only 32 years old, he didn't live to see the huge success of his last movie, as he suddenly died from what is now believed to have been a hypersensitive reaction to an ingredient in his pain medication. We oftentimes like to think that success is given only to the few lucky ones, that it's all about the talent, and that being an inspiring figure is only meant for the selected ones. But when we look closely at the unfortunately short yet amazing life of Bruce Lee and the positive impact he had in the history of the world, we start to understand that it is not only about being born under a positive omen. Imagine if Bruce would have become discouraged in his early age because of the taunting. Imagine if he would have stopped training martial arts when he was told that it's not meant for non-Asians. Imagine if he would have not dove into his passion for acting and dancing, if he had not dedicated himself to arduous studies and training and constant deepening of his knowledge. If not for all the persistence and endless hunger that he had, we would never have been touched by his wonderful life. Being born under a good omen is possibly just a light, positive touch in the beginning. Yet everyone has their ups and downs in their lives. Nonetheless, we see in Bruce Lee's example that it's not about being lucky, but it's about always staying hungry, always trusting in your passion, and never stopping in the quest to achieve your goal. If Bruce Lee ever had a secret to his success, it is this. Most of us know Steven Seagal as an Aikido master turned movie star. Despite losing his strong stand in Hollywood, he is still loved by many. Yet when you look at his life more closely, many plot holes start to pop out. Being a controversial figure as he is, one can only stop and wonder, what was the influence of Seagal to martial arts and his primary art, Aikido? To better understand the answer, we will have to look at some details that are often left unmentioned. There are loads of caricaturist montages about Seagal. One could argue that a caricature could be made about anyone. It is also said that there is 60% of truth in every joke, which means that every caricature is actually inspired by something. That seems to be true about Seagal when you look at the details of his past. It turns out that Seagal has a strong reputation in Hollywood as a pathological liar. There are many stories about his distorting of truth. One of the more commonly known, his claim to have been an operative in CIA and also a member of the Navy SEALs. In 1988, he told told Los Angeles Times, "You can say that I became an advisor to several CIA agents in the field, and through my friends in the CIA, met many powerful people and did special works and special favors." Yet it was stated by many of those associated with the CIA that this claim is absurd, as one of the examples in a story told by Gary Goldman, an ex-mercenary and former business partner of Steven Seagal. While they were together on a trip, he realized that Seagal had no clue how to even use a map or a compass. In his letter to Times Magazine, he wrote that Seagal would surely die of starvation if he was given a compass and a map that led to a restaurant 5 miles away. A story like this really puts some doubt about the possibility of Seagal ever being a CIA operative or a former Navy SEAL, even more so with him never giving any proof about it. Actually, even Steven Seagal's Aikido background has been caught being suspicious. Based on People's article published in 1990, during various interviews Seagal indicated that it was anywhere from 1968 to 1973 that he went to Japan. According to enrollment records at Fullerton College, he attended classes from the fall of 1970 and left after the fall of 1971, putting him at age 19 before he could even have departed for a longer stay in Japan. Of course, it could have been a mix of dates in Seagal's memory, but what these dates contradict with even more is that Steven was also claiming that he studied with Morihei Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido. This was not only denied by Ueshiba's Western student Terry Dobson, who stayed with the founder during that time, but Morihei also passed away in 1969 during the time when Seagal was recorded to be still in college in the States, making his claims even more so ridiculous. One element that is often used to fortify Seagal's image as a great martial artist is the often proclaimed statement that he was the first non-Asian person to open a dojo in Japan. Yet based on people's investigation, it turns out that the dojo that he was teaching in Japan belonged to his former wife's Miyako Fujitani's father. Looking at all these claims and contradictions, Seagal's role as a martial artist and an Aikidoka become really peculiar. Seagal had been into other series of troubles as well. To begin with, he had a series of lawsuits for sexual harassment, and there are many recorded stories of different women sharing how awful and sexually inappropriately Seagal was acting with them. Up until now, Seagal has had 3 lawsuits for sexual harassment spanning from 1995 to 2013. He has also been reported acting unethically and violently in the filming set, most notably when he intentionally punched actor John Leguizamo during a rehearsal when John laughed from Seagal's statement, "I'm in command, what I say is law. Anyone not agree?" There had been numerous other troubling events that were recorded about Seagal in various situations, yet these alone mentioned before are already enough to create a big sense of doubts about his personality and even credibility. One could argue that maybe some of these stories are not true, that maybe it is just what happens to actors in Hollywood with lots of gossiping. Yet then, why so much trouble with Seagal in particular? With so many of these stories and recorded facts, for all of them to be out of thin air, it becomes hard to believe. Yet trying to prove if it is true or not is not our main goal. It is now time to come back to our original question. Without doubt, Seagal has been an important figure in the development and popularization of martial arts in the West. Popular culture always had a strong influence on people's interest. With Seagal's fame rising, rose also the fame of martial arts and Aikido even more so. Many came trying martial arts after seeing his movies. Yet what image has he presented about Aikido and martial arts in general? Most martial arts masters who have demonstrated incredible feats even after turning famous proclaimed self-development, and good example is of utmost importance in martial art. Up to this day, we still look up to the founder of Jeet Kune Do and famous actor Bruce Lee, who would go about saying, "To me, the function and duty of a quality human being is the sincere and honest development of one's potential." Many other great martial artists would promote good character and example as well. Yet looking at Steven Seagal's actions, it almost seems that he was acting the opposite, showing a terrible example of how a true martial artist should be. What is even worse is that many still associate Seagal as a representation of Aikido, yet the founder of Aikido constantly emphasized that a true martial art should be a means to creating good individuals. He would often say that the goal of Aikido is to reconcile the world. Yet did Seagal represent this at all? Steven Seagal's movies not only lacked completely mentioning the philosophy of Aikido, but to make it worse, in his movies, he would always go about injuring and utterly destroying his opponents. With the excuse of them being bad guys, he would sometimes be hurting them beyond common sense. Some could say that Seagal was just playing his role as an actor, but even then, an actor always has a choice at what movies to star. Although his support of violence, which contradicts the essence of Aikido does not end there. Even in his life, he is proud to this day of having a close connection to Russia's President Vladimir Putin and expressing personal support to the annexation of Crimea. We all have a choice to whom we connect ourselves with, but here we speak of supporting a leader with a very controversial situation, and worse so, a military war strategy which has the outcome of violence and loss of lives. Could that ever be called a representation of Aikido? It is clear that no human is perfect, but the more we expose ourselves to the general public, the more conscious we should become that our actions do matter and that others will potentially take as an example of what we stand for. When this leads to a strong impact, we have to be very conscious of what we do in order to show a good example, not only for ourselves, but also for what we represent. Seagal's movies have brought a lot of attention and flow to martial arts, yet for what cost? Even these days, there are still people who would come to various dojos wanting to be the next Steven Seagal. But is that what we really want people to think of martial arts? Is that how we want a true martial artist to be represented and thought of? A person of pathological lying, sexual harassment, one using force without sense? Or so, many people, when being asked if they know Aikido, often connect it to Steven Seagal as a representation of what it is. Yet it is so far from what Aikido really stands for that despite all the attention that it brought, it only makes one wonder if there was more gain than actual harm to people's ability to understand what Aikido is truly about. So I ask again to look back at what we might have taken for granted. Steven Seagal is for many a representation of martial arts and especially that of Aikido. But is that really a presentation we want to have? Do we really want to take Seagal as an example and support him at that? Or should we rather take him as an example of what a martial artist shouldn't be? The more we will be aware of the true situation, the easier it will be for many to understand how it truly is. Martial arts should not be a vehicle for misconduct. It should be a vehicle for self-development and the bringing of the best values of ourselves, not only in fights, but even more importantly into our daily life. But as long as we will accept terrible examples as the representation of it, we will probably never get very far. Let's become clear on what is what and start cleaning the harm by supporting those who show a true example and doing our best to living a good example ourselves. We are all inspired about the greatest martial artists that ever lived. But did you ever wonder what made them the greatest? How come they were different from everyone else? In the next 17 minutes, I will answer this question by briefly looking at the history of the greatest martial artists. We will start our history by looking at 400 to 190 BC, ancient Greece, or more specifically Sparta. The Spartans are famous up to this day as creators of one of the first professional armies, where their warriors were intensely trained from the early age of 7 all the way up to 20, although their emphasis on military fitness began virtually at birth. All Spartan infants were brought before a council of inspectors and examined for physical defects, and those who weren't up to standards were left to die. Spartan warriors were feared as the most powerful army in the Greek world, and commonly known that one Spartan was worth several men of any other state. In 480 BC, in the famous Battle of Thermopylae, Spartan king Leonidas personally led an army of 300 Spartans and a few thousand Greek soldiers into battle against a much greater Persian army of more than 100,000. Tactically using a narrow coastal path of Thermopylae, also known as the Hot Gate, with their extremely developed battle skills and tactics, Leonidas and his small group was able to hold against the Persians for more than 2 days of battle. Eventually they were killed because of a local Greek betraying the secret path to Persians, which led to the assault of the Spartan army from the rear. Having dedicated their lives to the martial way, Spartan warriors could be easily considered to be as one of the first greatest martial arts of history. Yet although they were exposed to grueling and sometimes brutal training, not many know that they were also taught poetry, music, academics, and sometimes even dancing and politics. Each Spartan warrior followed a strict code of honor and placed emphasis on liberty, equality, and fraternity. To simply put, they had a deeper purpose for developing. They were not training to be simply brutal fighters, but rather to become pillars for their society. Support of their community was the source of their passion for constant improving, which surpassed mere technical training and led them to be extraordinary warriors that are legendary to this day. To continue our journey, we'll shift the attention further east by looking at 5th century China, or more specifically, the famous Shaolin Monastery where Shaolin Kung Fu has been created. Although it would be hard to point out the greatest Shaolin Kung Fu master of all time, throughout centuries, many of them have displayed incredible skills in this martial art. By developing not only their techniques, but also their bodies and minds, they are famous for being able to withstand incredible force and demonstrate amazing feats such as breaking glass with a needle. Many Shaolin Kung Fu masters have defeated various foreign opponents from Russia, Japan, and Europe in duels, proving the effectiveness of their style and also proving them to be some of the most early greatest martial artists. Yet here we can ask again, where did those skills and passion for their art come from? While it is not always confirmed, the creation of the famous Shaolin Kung Fu is often dedicated to Bodhidharma, an Indian Buddhist monk that brought Chan Buddhism to China, which later became known in Japan as the famous Zen Buddhism. Bodhidharma was a bodhisattva, a Buddhist term of a person seeking self-fulfillment in order to help all sentient beings. It is clear that Bodhidharma was led by this motivation, as he spent nearly all his life developing himself in order to help others. Bodhidharma spent a big part of his life in the Shaolin monastery. Based on the famous legend, he lived in a cave next to the monastery for 9 years, where he spent all his time meditating while gazing at a wall and being silent. It was also said that he was disturbed by the poor physical shape of the Shaolin monks, after which he instructed them in martial arts techniques to develop both mind and body. Thus, the Shaolin Kung Fu was born. Shaolin monks continued to train Kung Fu, yet also alongside practice meditation and the teachings of Buddhism. They dedicated themselves to this path in order to develop themselves and thus to better aid others. To further this journey, we will continue not so far from China to Japan, 10th to 16th century, where another legendary class of warriors has originated. Japanese warriors, known as the samurai, were famous not only for devoting their lives to mastering various martial arts, but literary arts as well. Samurai were expected to be cultured and literate and admired the ancient saying Bunbu Ryodo, or the pen and the sword in accord. The samurai were also taught that the path of the warrior was one of honor, emphasizing duty to one's master and loyalty unto death. Their devotion was so highly emphasized that a samurai who has lost his honor or failed his master was meant to commit a suicidal ritual known as seppuku. There are many samurai throughout history which are famous for their skill in battle and strategy, but Miyamoto Musashi stands out as one of the greatest duelists and martial artists. Born in 1584, he was educated by his uncle in Buddhism, basic literary skills, and also the sword. There are many controversial stories about Musashi's oddities, such as that he have rarely bathed or changed his clothes, as well as having suffered from a somewhat disfiguring skin condition. Yet history agrees about his excellence in the way of the sword. Musashi is said to have won his first duel when he was just 13 years old and continued to travel along Japan, engaging in more than 60 duels, always staying undefeated. Yet he did not limit himself to martial arts. Having mastered the sword, he also spent years studying Buddhism and was an accomplished artist, sculptor, and calligrapher. Musashi had little concern for his own personal comfort or even his life and dedicated himself entirely to his development. At the end of his life, he also attempted to transmit his knowledge of self-development and sword by writing a book called the Book of Five Rings. Here he emphasized that samurai should understand not only martial arts but the other professions as well. His teachings said, "Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world." The bridge from 19th to 20th century brought a few different great martial artists. Jigoro Kano, born 1860, early on became interested in a Japanese martial art known as Jiu-Jitsu. Kano's father was a great believer in the power of education, and thus he provided Jigoro with an excellent education. Yet being a slim child, Kano had a strong wish to become stronger. When a family friend told him that Jiu-Jitsu was a good way to develop strength, Kano decided to find a teacher, which was actually not an easy task back at the time. Jiu-Jitsu was becoming strongly unpopular due to the decline of the samurai and the beginning of a new era, yet that did not stop Jigoro's effort. He started going to various body therapists, assuming that they should know the martial arts teachers. Eventually, one of the people indeed directed Jigoro to a jiu-jitsu instructor, which taught him his knowledge. Yet after mastering jiu-jitsu, Kano felt that learning technique was not sufficient. Thus, he started improving the learned techniques while also adding an emphasis on philosophy and self-development. This mix in turn led to the creation of what is now known as Judo. Sensei Kano later stated that, "I therefore anticipated that practitioners would develop their bodies in an ideal manner to be outstanding in matches and also to improve their wisdom and virtue and make the spirit of judo live in their daily lives. We should be able to move properly in response to our opponents' unexpected attacks and should also not forget to make full use of every opportunity during our practice to improve our wisdom and virtue. These are the ideal principles of my judo." Just a few years after Jigoro Kano, in 1868, Gishin Funakoshi was born in Okinawa, a Japanese island where karate has originated. He was a weak and sickly child, yet nonetheless his parents brought him to karate training, where Funakoshi continued to develop great skills and strength. In 1922, he moved to Japan, where he stayed in a small room of dormitory doing cleaning and gardening during the day and teaching local students karate in the night. Later on, Funakoshi opened his dojo and continued to introduce karate to the Japanese. He's considered the founder of Shotokan Karate Aikido, perhaps the most widely known style of karate, and is attributed as being the father of modern karate. In addition to being a karate master, he was also an avid poet and philosopher who would reportedly go for long walks in the forest where he would meditate and write poetry. During his life, Funakoshi wrote the 20 Guiding Principle of Karate, where he laid out 20 rules by which students of karate are urged to abide in an effort to become better human beings. One of the principles state, apply the way of karate to all things. Therein lies the beauty. During the same time, another renowned martial artist lived in Japan. Born 1883, son of a landowner, Morihei Ueshiba was a weak, sickly child and bookish in his inclinations. In his early days, he witnessed how his father was beaten by a group of people. This experience led Ueshiba to take a promise that he will become strong in order to protect people around him. Ueshiba started studying several martial arts during his early life and was well known for his physical strength. In 1950, he met Sokaku Takeda, a master of jiu-jitsu, and was deeply impressed by his skills. Ueshiba even built a dojo in his house to invite Takeda as a permanent house guest in order to continue to learn from him. After years of training, he became a master of the art himself. Ueshiba became so famous for his own martial skills, which led to an advanced practitioners of different martial arts coming to train under him. He was so respected that people referred to him as O-sensei, translated as the great teacher. Yet Ueshiba did not limit himself to martial arts. He also went under a regime of spiritual training, regularly retreating himself to the mountains and performing purification meditation under heavy waterfalls. He was deeply concerned about other people and decided that a new martial art based not only on technical skills but also in self-development is necessary. Thus, he created Aikido. Morihei taught that life is growth. If we stop growing technically and spiritually, we are as good as dead. Another great karate master who was famous for his strength and skill lived in the early 20th century Japan. Masutatsu Oyama, commonly known as Master Oyama, was born 1923 in South Korea. He began studying Chinese martial arts at the age of 9 from a Chinese farmer who was working on the farm. One story of Oyama's youth involved his first teacher giving young Oyama a seed which he was to plant. When it sprouted, he was to jump over it 100 times a day. As the seed grew and became a plant, Oyama later said that he was able to jump between walls back and forth easily. In 1938, Oyama moved to Japan, where in 1946, he started learning Shotokan karate from the second son of Gishin Funakoshi. Mas later on became so devoted to karate that he retreated to mountains for 14 months, where he spent all his time training in isolation, followed by a second time which lasted 18 more months. Oyama became so strong that he did not only defeat various rivals, but was also able to fight and kill live bulls with his bare hands, sometimes even snapping their horns at the end. In 1957, he created his own karate style known as Kyokushin, which emphasized grueling training and full contact practice fighting. Oyama also emphasized self-development. He was highly influenced by Musashi's The Book of Five Rings and even wrote over 80 books himself. He was passionate about sharing his knowledge and taught that although it is important to study and train for skills and techniques, for the man who wishes to truly accomplish the way of Budo, it is important to make his whole life in training and therefore not aiming for skills and strength alone, but also for spiritual attainment. As we move further, our attention shifts to the West, where some of the greatest martial artists also lived their lives. Born 1913, a Brazilian child named Helio Gracie was frail and sickly. When his brother learned jiu-jitsu and shared it with his family, Helio wasn't allowed to be a part of the training, which involved actual fighting as he was too fragile. Instead, he stood aside and tried to understand the mechanics by watching. Faced with this physical problem, he started developing techniques which were not based much on strength at all, but rather on skill, and he became so good at this that when he was 18, he was given his first no-holds-barred fight against a boxer, which lasted less than a minute as Helio choked his opponent out. Helio and his brothers continued to develop his techniques, that what led to the creation of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Yet this style would have probably not developed if it was not for the passion of Helio to give a chance for the weaker to win against the stronger, by creating a martial art not based on strength. He saw this development surpassing martial arts as also a means of self-development. As he once said, Jiu-Jitsu is like a philosophy. It helped me to learn how to face life. As we move further in time, no list of greatest martial artists of the West could suffice without Bruce Lee. Bruce was born in 1940 at the Chinese hospital in San Francisco's Chinatown. According to the Chinese zodiac, Lee was born in both the hour and the year of the dragon, which according to tradition is a strong and virtuous omen. Indeed, it did seem to be true for his although short yet highly influential life. After Lee's birth, his family moved back to Hong Kong, where he spent his childhood. In 1957, after losing several fights with rival gang members, Lee began training in Wing Chun Kung Fu under a master named Yip Man. After a year into his Wing Chun training, most of Yip Man students refused to train with Lee after they learned of his mixed ancestry, as the Chinese were generally against teaching their martial arts techniques to non-Asian. However, Lee shown a keen interest in Wing Chun and continued to train privately with Yip Man himself. Despite his training, Lee often got involved into street fights, which led his father to the decision of sending him back to the United States to pursue a safer and healthier life. In 1959, Lee began teaching Chinese martial arts to all people of different race and cultural background. In 1961, Bruce started studying drama in university, where he also studied philosophy, psychology, and various other subjects. In 1964, after an impressive public demonstration of his martial arts skills, Lee was invited for an audition to a television show and was chosen to play the sidekick of a hero in a show called The Green Hornet. This brought him enough attention that some years later, Lee started playing main roles and getting more attention to the film industry, eventually becoming a superstar. With a combination of his martial arts skills and charisma, he had a strong influence on both martial arts and the genre of martial arts films. Yet he did not limit himself to physical technique only. Lee himself was well-read and had an extensive library. He was influenced by the teachings of Taoism, Jiddu Krishnamurti, and Buddhism. In 1967, he developed a martial art which he called Jeet Kune Do, governed by a philosophy of self-development. Bruce Lee said himself that too much time is given to the development of skill and too little to the development of the individual for participation. Jeet Kune Do ultimately is not a matter of petty techniques, but of highly developed spirituality and physique. Born the same year and also a friend of Bruce Lee, although today Chuck Norris to most is known as a form of humor, he was actually a highly influential and prominent martial artist. As a child, he was non-athletic, shy, and scholastically mediocre. His father went on alcohol drinking binges that lasted for months at a time. Embarrassed by his father's behavior and the family's financial plight, Norris developed a debilitating introversion that lasted for his entire childhood. Yet in 1958, he joined the United States Air Force, where he became interested in martial arts, which helped him in his development. After he discharged from the military in 1962, he continued to train and teach karate while also participating in tournaments. Although he had a varied beginning, experiencing both winning and losing, in 1968 he won the professional middleweight karate champion title, which he held for 6 consecutive years. In 1969, he won karate's Triple Crown for the most tournament wins of the year and the Fighter of the Year award by Black Belt magazine. Chuck has also received a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and made history in 1990 when he was the first Westerner in the documented history of Taekwondo to be given the rank of 8th degree black belt grandmaster. Yet his passion to martial arts was not limited to technique. During his life, Norris created his own style, Chun Kuk Do, translated as the universal way, which gave great focus to self-development. He was also known as a philanthropist, political activist, and a devoted Christian, and wrote several inspirational books. His determination that led him to learn martial arts was also present in all of his life. To quote Chuck, "I've always found that anything worth achieving will always have obstacles in the way, and you got to have that drive and determination to overcome those obstacles en route to whatever it is that you want to accomplish." Our last story, although arguably calling a boxer a martial artist, is about a man who brought boxing to the next level. Muhammad Ali, born 1942, showed at an early age that he wasn't afraid of any bout, inside or outside of the ring. At the age of 12, Ali had his bike stolen and told the police officer that he wanted to beat up the thief. The police officer, who was also a boxing coach, suggested that Ali should first learn how to box. Thus, his career began. Ali showed great skills and performance in matches, winning almost all of his fights, including the light heavyweight gold medal in the 1960 Summer Olympics in Rome, and in 1963, the heavyweight champion of the world title. Ali was known for his lightning speed and fancy footwork, yet Muhammad has also shown interest in various other subjects. He was concerned about the religious freedom and racial justice, which led him to join a controversial movement for the rights of African American people called the Nation of Islam. This led him to resist his draft to serve in the Vietnam War, what created various difficulties in his life, yet was an inspiring example for many. In later years, he also became involved in philanthropy, raising various funds for developing countries and on other needs, thus going beyond his fighting skills. When he opened the Muhammad Ali Center in his hometown, he said, "I wanted more than a building to house my memorabilia. I wanted a place that would inspire people to be the best that they could be at whatever they choose to do, and to encourage them to be respectful of one another." Most of us are so concerned about becoming good at martial art techniques that as soon as we learn it, we stop because we have no other greater inspiration to go further for. Yet looking at the examples of the greatest martial artists, it becomes clear that the greatness of martial arts skills does not end at the physical development. Each of the great martial artists through all history saw a deeper reason for their training. They had a concern for more than themselves and became devoted to master various abilities and arts to aid others in their development. When they learned their techniques, they did not stop. Their passion for greater goals led them to go further than anyone else. They devoted themselves to becoming the best they can be, thus becoming masters not only in martial arts but also in life. Zombies are extremely popular these days. We've seen hundreds of movies, video games, and short clips including these infamous creatures. They were shot at, stabbed, pierced, and fairly often enough, dealt with using martial arts. Yet if a zombie apocalypse would overtake our world, would martial arts really help us survive? And if so, which martial art would be best for it? Hi, my name is Rokas Leo, and this time we're going to look at a brief history of martial arts and zombies. Although the origin of the zombie concept dates back all the way to 8th century Congo, in popular culture zombies came to major attention in the 1920s when a few different books about zombies were published, and in 1930s when the first full-feature film about zombies called White Zombie came to the screen. Yet the zombie's most massive success became obvious in 1968 with George R. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. While survivors would defend themselves against zombies in various ways, using martial arts as a means was still uncommon back in the day, at least in the Western culture. Some Eastern movies would be more keen on using martial arts to fight the reanimated dead, yet their fighting styles were mostly surreal, relying on superhuman skills and feats. Martial arts in the zombie world of the West became more common in 2002 with the release of the Resident Evil, a movie loosely based on the Japanese video game of the same name. The main character Alice, portrayed by Mila Jovovich, in the movie successfully uses her martial arts not only against zombie people, but also zombie dogs. Yet the whole film is still clearly not seeking to portray realism, and Mila's martial arts skills here can be really considered as a serious reference. Unfortunately, same applied even more in later Resident Evil movies and video games too, with the second movie turning Mila Jovovich's character into a superhuman. Eventually though, we end up at a TV series based on a graphic novel of the same name, which has achieved massive success and spent a great deal of time in the world of zombies while also trying its best to maintain a sense of realism, as much as one can do so in a world filled with reanimated flesh-eating people. The Walking Dead started airing in 2010, yet it hasn't shown signs of martial arts until the end of Season 2 and beginning of Season 3, with the appearance of the Japanese sword-wielding character Michonne. She successfully uses her sword skills, which, based on her movements, could be classified as a mix of traditional kenjutsu and some improvisational forms, to get out of many difficult situations. In Season 5, we also get reintroduced to the character Morgan Jones, who later reveals to have learned both Aikido skills and philosophy, although he mainly ends up using his staff movements, which actually do not come from traditional Aikido staff forms, but rather from movements of the staff used in karate. Although these are only two characters who display martial arts skills in the zombie world, which is more closely tied to realism, we can begin our analysis here of what could be useful to us in discovering if martial arts would help us in such a situation. As mentioned before, Morgan's character based on the show is officially using Aikido, yet 90% of the time he sticks to using his staff, which actually makes sense. In most zombie-related fiction, a zombie bite can lead to deadly results led by a strong infection. Also, biting is oftentimes the main way of attack of a zombie, which makes being in close distance with it most dangerous. This partially explains the success of both of our martial arts characters in using their longer distance weapons. Other characters in the show also use various bladed and blunt weapons, such as knives and sticks, yet having no martial arts experience, their more easily wieldable weapons do not give them as big of a distance and also oftentimes get stuck in the body of the zombie because of lack of proper technique. Considering these facts, using a martial arts based weapon actually makes sense, thus giving us a first plus in having martial arts skills in a zombie apocalypse world. One could quickly argue that using martial arts is by far inferior to using firearms, yet the TV show tackles this subject quite well too. Despite having access to firearms, first of all, the ammunition is not endless, while a staff or a sword can last much longer. Also, in various zombie material, including the show, zombies are attracted to loud noises, such as gunshots, thus giving yet another plus to using martial arts as a silent solution. Although up until now we spoke more about using martial arts weapons, we should obviously consider the vast majority of open-handed martial arts developed to fight in hand-to-hand combat. Even bladed and blunt weapons would eventually wear down, or even break, or could be lost in the midst of a fight, same thing applies to firearms too, making hand-to-hand combat a preferable solution. We should again consider the danger of zombies in close distance, and that each strike could end up being a zombie snack, but if there are no weapons and nowhere to run, having to choose between having hand-to-hand combat experience and not, the first case is obviously strongly preferable. This point yet again gives another plus to knowing martial arts in a zombie apocalypse. Nevertheless, not all of the points are so right. No matter how polished one's technique is, using martial arts weapons or hand-to-hand combat still requires physical strength. Killing a few would not necessarily be a problem to skilled martial arts practitioners, but most likely the number of zombies would be almost endless, with so many people being infected. Thus, when we start fighting hundreds of zombies using physical skills, the human body would start to reach its physical limits and come closer to exhaustion with each kill, making firearms, running away, or simply avoiding zombies entirely a much more preferable tactics than trying to beat them all with our skills. Speaking about the great number of zombies, there is one more thing we need to take a look at. As in many martial arts movies, zombie movies oftentimes also present the one attacker at a time while others bouncing around phenomena, which is not really realistic too. In movies and other popular culture, usually one or at most 3 zombies will walk towards a character at the same time, while others will be still keeping their distance to give enough space and time for their survivor to deal with them in a step-by-step manner. Yet considering that most likely there would be hundreds of zombies in most places, in reality they would not coordinate between themselves to attack in a comfortable way. There's a great chance that there would be a whole wave of them coming simultaneously, giving very little time and space for martial artists to deal with each one of them at a time using his skills. Although we should still consider the martial arts' ability to mind the surroundings,
Always mind your surroundings,
and use it to their advantage, a skill practiced by some of the more traditional martial arts, as a great benefit, so that potentially compensates for the previous disadvantage. Last thing we will look at this time will be the difference between which martial art will be used. Although we will look more in depth at which martial art specifically would be best to know for a zombie apocalypse in the next part of the video, it already becomes quickly obvious that not all martial arts would fit the case. Martial arts which rely on very close distance should already be considered twice before applied, since a zombie can see that as an invitation to dinner rather than a clinch. Although a very skilled martial artist should be able to control an opponent in his guard or clinch effectively enough in order not to give space for a bite, yet while there are pluses and minuses here, there's undoubtedly another big related disadvantage. Zombie fighting is not a sport, and while one zombie is held in a guard or clinch, others won't wait for their turn and will begin the feast. That doesn't mean that some other skills of these martial arts could not be applied, but we should stay conscious that not all martial art techniques will prove to be useful. We could continue to look at advantages and disadvantages of martial arts in the zombie world for a whole nother video, yet it quickly becomes clear enough that having martial arts skills rather than not in a zombie-infested world would in the end be a great advantage. Nevertheless, we also have to admit that a zombie apocalypse is not the most likely event in our lives. Even having to use martial arts skills in the street without consciously getting into trouble is becoming less and less likely in modern world and countries. That is why it is important to remember that training martial arts is not meant only to use it in that one possible apocalypse or fight, but rather that it's a great tool for self-development and development of character, which we will be able to use and apply so often in any life decision or situation in our own real lives. 600 years ago, in feudal Japan, our lives would have depended on how good we are at martial arts. Similar rules applied to medieval Europe or ancient Greece and Rome. Yet martial arts are not the same as in the past. So why martial arts are still relevant today? What made them change in the history of time? The last country to still use martial arts as a priority for surviving deadly encounters was feudal Japan. In the 1860s, when steam engine and telegraph were already in use and America was fighting its civil war, the warrior class of the samurai were ruling Japan. Their chances to live another day depended on their martial skills, and having to fight until death was a common event. Yet after the Meiji Restoration, when the military ruling came to an end and Japan opened up to foreign countries, all the exposure to different cultures and technology led to a fall of the need for martial arts. Martial arts such as Kenjutsu, the way of the sword, and Jiu-Jitsu became unpopular. People started believing it was outdated, and while being challenged to a death duel or participating in close combat battles came to an end, few saw reasons to practice it. Those devoted to martial arts came to conclusions that their practices had to be changed according to more modern times. This created opportunities for masters such as the Goro Kano. Sensei Kano, a devoted student of Jiu-Jitsu, understanding the changings of time, excluded deadly techniques and stressed great emphasis on physical and moral development. Thus, Judo, a martial art suitable for the times, was born. Further development of martial arts was also influenced by the different situations that modern day presented. Martial arts became increasingly more important as a tool of self-development and competition, rather than as a tool of survival, thus giving birth to modern martial arts that we practice today. Nevertheless, this contradicts with some people's thinking. No doubt, there are extreme cases such as military hand-to-hand combat training, which can still be decisive in a matter of survival, and other professions which deal with physical conflict all the time. Yet being attacked to a regular person in a life-threatening situation is increasingly rare in most countries. Despite that, some people still see martial arts as a means of survival. But then if martial arts are still primarily a matter of survival, why do we keep dressing with Japanese gi and practice bows and continue to develop techniques which are often not useful in a self-defensive situation? Too often we forget the meaning of martial arts today as a tool of development and spend hundreds of hours preparing for that one encounter that we might never have. We end up arguing about which techniques are effective and which martial art doesn't deserve to exist. We end up living in tension and fear of conflict, rather than becoming self-confident and ready for more than just brawling in the streets. Surely, martial arts can be very important in self-defense situations, but they are so much more than that. Yet whilst we will see it as a means of survival primarily, we will miss so much more that it can offer. Aikido has been in a wave of controversy for years now. Even the once considered god of Aikido in popular culture is now being washed away in the mud. But what has happened to this art's once former glory? Where did it all go so wrong? Morihei Shiba, also known as O-sensei, the great teacher, born in 1883, during his life has become a master of a classical jiu-jitsu style of Aikido-jutsu, a form of kenjutsu, Japanese swordsmanship, and jo-jutsu, the art of the combat staff. He was also a devotee of various spiritual practices, spending a big part of his life in meditation and studies of sacred texts. With years of experience, he has come to connect all of his knowledge into a martial art that he called Aikido. Aikido was so highly respected that for a certain period of time, only people who had a recommendation were allowed to practice it. Many famous martial artists for entire Japan came to train with Ueshiba and had a lot of respect for him. Yet these days, Aikido is looked with a lot of skepticism by fellow martial artists, most notably by that of MMA and BJJ, although not excluding many others. But in order to realize where this has started, we will have to take a better look at the past. Traditional jiu-jitsu was created and developed in Japan by the samurai, mainly to defend against armored and potentially armed opponents in the battlefield or in other places. Yet after the Meiji Restoration in 1868, which ended the samurai class, completely changed people's relationship to martial arts. Various martial arts, including jiu-jitsu, have started to be considered unfashionable and had little interest to people. Also, with the changing times, most of the jiu-jitsu masters started to conclude that their art has become impractical and thus stopped their practices entirely. Yet Jigoro Kano, born 1860, being bullied in his childhood, decided to learn jiu-jitsu nevertheless. After a long and difficult search for a teacher who would still be willing to teach, he eventually not only came to learn the art himself, but also became a master of it. Yet he did not stop there. With jiu-jitsu still being unpopular and not accepted by the general public, Sensei Kano decided to not only change some of the techniques, but also to rediscover its emphases and philosophy which suited more the modern day. Thus, Judo was born, a martial art that was more adapted to the current time. Judo has become increasingly popular and its practitioners constantly won in contests against other styles of jiu-jitsu, thus proving its superiority. Hearing all the talks about it, Mitsuya Maeda, born 1878, became interested in the art and started practicing in his early years. He ended up studying with Jigoro Kano's senior students with the supervision of the judo founder himself. As judo became known in the United States, it was decided to send more judokas there from Japan to promote the art. Maeda took the opportunity. He traveled around the whole West, not only teaching but also constantly participating in various demonstrations and contests. In 1914, he first visited Brazil, where he engaged in his judo activity and became well known. While in Brazil, in 1917, he met Carlos Gracie, who soon became his student and ended up learning from Maeda for a few years. Carlos, having learned judo, also back then known as Kano Jiu-Jitsu, later on continued to pass his knowledge to his other Gracie brothers. Amidst his brothers, the most notable one was Helio Gracie. Born 1913, Helio was a frail child. Thus, he wasn't able to perform many of the techniques himself due to the lack of physique and other health issues. This in turn led him to modify and improve what he was taught. Continuing to improve what they have learned, Carlos and Helio's Jiu-Jitsu has become so effective that they decided to start hosting an event which was already popular in Brazil, known as Vale Tudo, a full-contact, unarmed combat event with limited set of rules, where the Gracie brothers would compete against other styles of combat. Here, the Gracies were actually able to defeat most of the opponents. When the Gracies went to the United States to further promote their style, they started referring to their style as the Gracie or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to differentiate from other names. They kept constantly improving their style and proving its effectiveness against various fighters, which also supported their technical growth. Thus, the roots were born of such a well-known martial art these days, which we often simply call now by the abbreviation of BJJ. With tournaments of various martial arts becoming increasingly popular, various martial arts had started to be blended together. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu had also a big influence in this mix, since in 1993, the first Ultimate Fighting Championship, also known as UFC, was hosted, where Royce Gracie, the son and student of Helio Gracie, won the tournament, thus leading to a realization that BJJ has to be included in the practice of what has become known as mixed martial arts, or MMA. With the popularity of MMA and its various tournaments rising, the development of the blend of various martial arts continued. This blend, as much as BJJ, focused on eliminating everything that is not necessary and increasing the efficiency of a fighter in a tournament, and leaving only whatever is most practical. In other words, practicality and efficiency has become the basis of modern martial arts. Yet here we reach the point where we come back to Aikido. With its deep philosophical roots, Morihei Shiba did not approve any competition. He stated that Aikido is meant for reconciling conflict and the betterment of the individual, rather than deciding who is more efficient. Thus, Aikido was never exposed to an urge of needing to improve its techniques in order to perform better in tournaments, or was never continuously forced to look at its lacks. Also, ironically enough, despite that Osensei kept improving and changing his art, many of the Aikido instructors refused to change Aikido on a fundamental level, trying to honor the founder in this way. Even some main Aikido teachers, such as Sensei Morihiro Saito, went so far as to make it his primary goal to preserve the art exactly as it is. While this corresponds to the cultural values of Japan to preserve and honor the past, this phenomena has been transmitted to the West as well, with many instructors refusing to make any substantial changes to the art, thus leaving Aikido with the same form, techniques, and presentation with only minor changes. Not having any exposure to competition and being preserved by its instructors, Aikido has become static, while BJJ and MMA has continued to constantly improve, thus eventually starting to give controversy to the Aikido art as to if it has any practical use at all. There had been some attempts to make Aikido more efficient, for example such as the so-called real Aikido created by a Serbian man named Ljubomir Vracharevic. Real Aikido is based on Aikido techniques with the attempt to modify them in a more efficient and practical way. Yet while it maintains a similar external shell to Aikido that was founded by Oshiba, it does not touch upon the original philosophy or spirit that the founder felt are absolutely necessary in this art, which brings us to the second wall that Aikido is facing. Many of Aikido instructors, including the top students of Washiba, were so focused on the technical side of Aikido that most of them neglected the spiritual side almost entirely, which again brings us to the ironical fact. For Ashiba, the spirituality and Aikido were inseparable. He even went so far as to saying that these techniques are only for health. What Aikido is about is spiritual. Yet even these days, so many instructors are focused on trying to prove Aikido's liability as a martial art, or try to preserve it so much that the spiritual side of it becomes left out. While even senior instructors and many Aikidokas are facing this conflict, not being clear on what Aikido is or where it should go, the art is left with so much controversy and space for criticism. Yet what if we would change this? Sensei Morihei Shiba saw Aikido as a tool to reconcile the world and to help individuals improve not only their physique, but most importantly their character. For him, technique was just a platform upon which he could share his message, that true victory is the victory against oneself. The world already has plenty of effective martial arts, yet it is still missing an effective way to reconcile it. Sensei saw that, and that is the reason he created a different martial art and not a continuation of Jiu-Jitsu. If Sensei wasn't concerned about proving Aikido against other martial arts, and he wasn't concerned about the importance of technique, why are we? As long as we will put Aikido in the same box as BJJ or MMA, it will never become as popular. Even if we would modify it and adapt its techniques, yet we would lose the essence of it, what would the use of Aikido be? I say, let's stop comparing football to chess. Let's respect them, appreciate, and benefit from what they are. Aikido can be a unique tool to make a difference in people's lives and that of the world. It does not deny the chance to improve it, make it better, and adapt it to this day. Actually, it needs that. But just changing the technique will never be enough. As long as we will continue to put it into an existential competition to other martial arts, we will never have the space to reveal Aikido's true message and purpose, and it will never have the popularity that it deserves. I say, let's stop fighting against other martial arts trying to prove something against them. Let's stop trying to preserve the external shell of Aikido. Let's stop wasting time and start rediscovering and presenting Aikido for what it is. A practice meant to help each individual become better and to reconcile the world. How to do this? We'll have to rediscover again together. But we start with asking this question and not trying to prove something or trying to win against others. Hi, my name is Rokas Leo, and today I'm going to do an analysis of a viral video called Aikido Master in MMA, Part 1 and 2, where a supposed Aikido practitioner is fighting in an amateur MMA fight against two different fighters. Before I begin, there are a couple of disclaimers I need to make. I wouldn't normally do such a video, but respecting a request from one of my subscribers, I decided to take up the challenge. It's important to note that despite doing Aikido for 13 years, I haven't participated in an organized MMA style match, nor am I a competitive fighter. Personally, I do not see Aikido meant to be a practice meant for competitions, and I feel that it has a different purpose. But nevertheless, I wanted to share a few thoughts to give some understanding of what was most likely happening in the strategy of the Aikido practitioner. I did some Wing Chun and BJJ, but I'll share only a few ideas as a young Aikido instructor that I have in connection with a few sparring matches I had quite a while ago with my friends and some Aikido practice related thoughts. Second disclaimer, the original video does not belong to me, so if you would like to see the original, follow the link below and support the original channel if you like this kind of video. Last disclaimer, Aikido, as many different martial arts, depends strongly on the style and instructor that you are learning it from. One fighter cannot be taken as an absolute example, but only as a reference for analyzing at best. With the disclaimer said, let us begin. Now we have to realize that traditional Aikido is not developed for modern competitions. Most styles don't put a lot of emphasis on strikes, as you will see in this video too, and it mainly emphasizes locks and throws from grabs and punches, since it derives from traditional jiu-jitsu based on dealing with armored samurai opponents on a battlefield where punches and strikes weren't effective. In this video, the Aikido practitioner is wearing white gi pants. As you see, he's very relaxed, which is an often emphasis in Aikido, and also waiting for a strike, what is a common practice in Aikido too, which brings us to my first point. Most Aikido techniques could be called receptive, or in other words, defensive, meaning that we receive a strike or attack and then try to use that energy, which is not necessarily well suited for a competitive match, but rather a street situation, since many strikes, especially in the beginning of a competitive fight, are feints meant to try out the distance and the opponent. Yet again, as you see in the video, the Aikido practitioner, as soon as he sees a strike, he jumps on the strike, most likely going for a technique. When that doesn't work, he seems to be receptive again, waiting for the next attack, trying to block, but then a punch to the head leaves him disoriented and searching for space to recover. From here on, the disorientation is visible, and then from my perspective, he seems to let go of his first initial strategy and just waltz into attack randomly, without a specific strategy, which in turn becomes defensive and eventually panic, most likely because of a lack of clarity of his actions, in a somewhat disorientation, and eventually is defeated. In the second video, we jump a couple of months ahead. We see the same Aikido practitioner against a different fighter. He still maintains the relaxed stance, yet this time after the first fight, he seems to change his strategy and becomes more initiative, being the first one to go for striking and stepping in. He still seems receptive to strikes, yet probably with the experience of the last fight, this time he doesn't wait for the attack, but rather steps in to try to grab his opponent, most likely again looking for a chance to apply an Aikido technique. He seems to be more focused this time, expecting more strikes, and again, as soon as he sees a leg coming at him, he catches it as a supposed opportunity to go for a throwing pinning technique. They both go down on the ground, and the Aikido practitioner goes for a choke, which doesn't really seem very effective, most likely due to the lack of experience in neck chokes, which is also rarely a part of Aikido curriculum. As his opponent loses the neck choke, the Aikido person loses his balance and falls down. He does seem to try to keep his distance using his legs, but he doesn't seem comfortable on the ground either, since groundwork is not a part of a traditional Aikido either. His opponent uses the chance and goes for ground and pound, as the Aikido practitioner seems to lose his composure and looks for a way out of it. Finally, he grabs his opponent's arm, which is again an understandable approach for an Aikido person, either hoping to use a traditional technique or by now actually simply being defensive. Both the fighters seem a bit lost in the situation and eventually depart to a greater distance. The Aikido practitioner seems to still hold his ground, showing a difference between his first fight, and he again seems to go for the same strategy as in the beginning of the fight, being initiative and most likely going for shorter distance and potential grab. As that doesn't work, he seems to switch again to being receptive and trying to find a chance as he defends. With that not giving results, he seems to bounce back and forth between two strategies, but then after a punch to the head, he again becomes disoriented and his moves start to begin to seem random. Finally, another blow to the head finishes the fight. The referee still gives a chance for a ground and pound, but it's already obvious the fight is over. Aikido today is not a very popular martial art between competitive fighters, but I feel it's important to understand that it's actually not developed for that purpose. I do understand some people trying to go into competitions to prove Aikido works, yet being designed for a different purpose, it should be either recreated or simply practiced for what it is. The founder himself discouraged his students from competing and was very clear that Aikido for him was a self-development tool. It does work under different circumstances, as in an unpredicted fight, and it also depends on who and how the person is practicing. But Aikido shouldn't be judged by a single fight on YouTube under unknown conditions, as it should not be pushed into a box that it doesn't belong to. While MMA fighters train all the time preparing for their fights and emulating them constantly, Aikido practitioners develop different skills not really meant for the same purpose. Thus, when being pushed into these conditions, cannot really live up to them and truthfully shouldn't. If you saw my previous videos, you know that I don't promote Aikido as the ultimate combat martial art, yet I see it as a great tool for self-development, which also works as self-defense. I did my best to analyze this fight to give some perspective on what the practitioner attempted, but not to justify it. If someone wants to make Aikido into a competitive sport, they should probably just change the name of it. Yet if you want to practice Aikido, it's important to understand its limits and to respect its purpose. For those who want to compete, should go to competitive martial arts, yet for those wanting to practice Aikido, should do so. Welcome to Aikido Shulei's Top 5 Aikido Documentaries. We've chosen 5 different documentaries about Aikido that seem to catch most of attention to those practicing and also to those who never tried Aikido before. First off, we have Aikido Kyoto Okamoto Yoko Shihan. Although it's a fairly new documentary, it has already caught the attention of many people. It's very well filmed, the quality and music is great, there's nice balance between training shots and the interior to keep the viewer's attention. Also, it is not so common to see a documentary featuring a woman sensei, which also makes it stand out of the crowd and make it into our list. Although Steven Seagal is a very controversial figure, we cannot deny how well this documentary is made. Despite at certain moments feeling a bit puffed up, it succeeds in drawing the viewer in and making everyone who watches it feel inspired about the art and burning either to start it or run back to the mat and train it again. Also, there's a good chance to get closer to the Steven Seagal's legend, or at least to the bright side of it. A great mix between some history, information, and entertainment, the samurai spirit captures it all. Although not always precise and sometimes a bit artificial, it is a great documentary to get someone interested into the art and also receive some insights about Aikido. Considering the colorfulness and wide covering of various topics, we've chosen this to be our number 3 of our best Aikido documentaries. Although it has both its ups and downs, the National Geographic's Aikido documentary stands up to its name. It touches both Japan's and Aikido's history and introduces some of the most well-known Aikido senseis out there, which makes it a well-deserved place in our list. The documentary not only introduces you to the art, but also takes you on a journey through different places and moments of importance of this sophisticated path. How could this list be without a documentary dedicated to the founder himself, Morihei Ueshiba? Although just 30 minutes long, it allows us to come closer to the once living legend, not only letting us know more about the practice, but also about the life and philosophy that O-sensei cherished so much. It is a documentary that captures a moment in Aikido's history and should be seen by all its practitioners.